people won't like this, but one Lynn Carter story is kind of like the next Lynn Carter story. Okay, I mean, I'm sorry, man, but it's like, I'm not wrong. Okay,
Oh, oh yes, we are very well aware.
Yeah, we're with you 110% on that one.
you know, it's kind of like, oh, you see one baby, you seen them all. You read one Lynn Carter book,
I think that makes a lot of sense with the way that like sword and sorcery is too. Of like take like Conan. Like we know Conan's not going to die in his stories.
Right?
We know he's going to be victorious in the end, most likely get the girl.
Sure.
But it's about the story itself. It's about the progression of how he goes from this really dire straits to escaping with his life.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so I think that that parallels perfectly with that the Greek tragedy.
Yeah. Thanks. I think so too, because we're in there with him in it. I forget who it was. I quote him, but saying that, oh, who was the Howard scholar? But he said Howard starts with a train wreck. How the hell are we going to get out of this? I've noticed over the years that if a young person, I'm a dad, I got a daughter, especially a young woman, is going to be hurt. Like I haven't been able to go back to reread Iphigenia at all. It's, oh, let's sacrifice her. He's so
Yeah.
good, daughter. Or who was the young princess in Game of Thrones? I read the first book, but Game of Thrones on TV, they burn her alive. And it's like I can't watch this. This is too much for me. I know what's going on in history, and I understand how brutal human beings can be. But for me personally, that it does something. So I figured it was kind of some kind of Atlantis land or something like that. And then when I started thinking about Oron and how huge like the canvas had to be, it's kind of like, all right, yeah, I better come up with a place for him, and I'll come up with a history. And so I did. What I didn't want to do was have like really strong immersive scenes in the story. I mean, even though it's a novel, I didn't want you to be immersed in some scenes. I tell you that the rock is cold and the tunnel is unlit and all that stuff. But I don't want to tell you how the swan was prepared and how we eat swan. Like I don't want to go that deep. It's like they had swan for dinner. It was a delicacy. The end. This is sword and sorcery. We get on with it. And if you as the reader want to say, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I should look into that." So that's how I defend myself on that. That's like the background parchment for that.
Now, you mentioned again in Arcane Arts that a little weirdness goes a long way in sword and sorcery fiction. And speaking of immersion, that uh, ties into like magic. And you said that a larger portion of weirdness, or especially the magical, moves us into the realm of fairy and high fantasy, with the focus less on the struggle of the protagonist and more so on world building,
Yeah.
understandably. How far along do you think that limit is, and like where does the line of fairy and high fantasy stand for you? Because if we go all the way back to the Red Sonja novels,
Mhm.
for instance, you had, going off of memory here, you had evil necromantic sorcerers that worked mostly off page with Ikribu.
Mhm.
You had extra planar threats with When Hell Laughs. You had the evil golem raising sorcerers with Demon Knight. I think I'm mixing those two up.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah.
So you had these great threats, but is it when they're localized? So in Ikribu, it's mostly a single kingdom. In Demon Knight,
Mhm.
it's a city, and when Hell Laughs, it's an island.
Yeah.
Even in Tales of Atlamal, which is like knit various smaller stories, they
Sure.
culminate in this like civilization ending threat, but it's still sort of localized to that island. Do you think that's the answer to bringing in a higher level of magic? Because Cam and I both feel like certain stories veer into high fantasy when they tackle like extraneous amounts of magic. So how do you reconcile that?
I would say the word that occurs to me is proportion. It should be proportional to whatever canvas you're working on. I would say, and if it's a short story, how big is it going to be before it drowns out, what's happening to the little characters down here? Even if you look at Howard and his Conan novellas, it's proportional. I mean, we know Conan's big in terms of characterization and what he brings and who he is and everything. So in a novella, you can have a powerful sorcerer and a huge battle and that kind of stuff, and you can crawl around, in Scarlet Citadel, and then at the end of it, even have him jump on some beast that flies him back to where he was going to. But it's still proportional, I would say, to what's going on. If it's small scale, then the magic may be strong, but the effect of it, I would say, should be proportional to that. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think
haven't
that
thought
makes
this
sense.
through before, but I think just my gut, I would say that's what it is.